In the 1950s, Noam Chomsky of MIT made the outrageous claim that language learning is impossible. What he meant was that given the amount of information that children have to go on, learning was not possible without extra information coming from elsewhere, an argument from the poverty of the stimulus or the learnability. He reasoned that children learn language so quickly and with so few errors that they cannot be merely learning language by trial and error, as behaviors such as Skinner suggested, or by another general learning mechanism such as analogy. The only way that language could be learned was if children are given support by innate knowledge which fills in the blanks left by messy human speech. To illustrate this, we will use one of Chomsky's most celebrated examples, that of turning statements into questions. Suppose you are given the following statement: the man is playing football. We can turn this into a question that asks what the man is doing by simply taking the is and moving it to the beginning of the sentence like this: is the man playing football? Now, Chomsky asks us to imagine that the child is attempting to discover the linguistic rule that turns statements into questions simply by observing instances of statements and questions as above. Imagine that the child encounters a different sentence to turn into a question. The man who is wearing shorts is playing football. The problem is that the word is appears twice. Which one should the child move? A child familiar with simple sentences such as those like sentence 1 might be tempted to move the first is, producing this sentence: is the man who wearing shorts is playing football? If children simply worked out grammatical rules by trial and error, as many early theories claimed, then we should expect to see such errors at least some of the time, but we really don't. According to Chomsky, this is because children do not just perceive utterances as linear streams of words, they perceive them as hierarchically structured. Implicitly, children parse utterances into higher-level units such as noun phrases and verb phrases. In the first sentence, the man is a noun phrase containing information about the subject of the sentence. Is playing football, on the other hand, is a verb phrase which contains information about what the man is doing. In the second sentence, the noun phrase is rather longer: the man who is wearing shorts, because who is wearing shorts is saying something about the man rather than about the action he is performing. Because the question requires the child to ask what the man is doing, the verb phrase, the is that is moved has to be the one that relates to the verb phrase rather than that of the noun phrase. Note that if we wanted to ask a question about the man, whether he is wearing shorts, we would move the is from the noun phrase to end up with the is the man who is playing football wearing shorts. The overwhelming majority of people who can speak a language have probably never heard of noun and verb phrases, and they are things that do not come naturally to students of grammar and linguistics in the first instance. But everyone is implicitly aware of their existence, otherwise they would not be able to speak in grammatical sentences. This is a classic example of the learnability argument. The information needed to turn statements into questions is not something that is given to children in the linguistic environment. Nor do parents explicitly teach children about verb and noun phrases. But this information must come from somewhere, and Chomsky argues that it is innate. There is one crucial question: do children produce grammatical rather than ungrammatical utterances when turning statements into questions? Crane and Nakayama conducted an experiment in which 3-year-olds were required to ask a Jabba the Hutt puppet whether, for instance, the dog who was wearing the blue collar likes playing fetch. In the majority of cases, children were able to turn such statements into grammatical questions and never made errors, such as those in our earlier example where the incorrect is belonging to the noun phrase is moved to the front of the sentence. Other evidence shows that babies are capable of understanding complex syntactic structure. Catherine Hirsch-Pasek and Roberta Golenkopf showed that babies between 13 and 15 months of age who were in the one-word stage of language production could discriminate between similar sounding but syntactically distinct phrases. The infants were seated in front of 2 televisions, each of which showed a film, in which a pair of adults dressed up as Cookie Monster and Big Bird from television's Sesame Street performed simple activities. A voiceover said, "Oh look, Big Bird is washing Cookie Monster. Find Big Bird washing Cookie Monster." Careful measurement showed that the baby spent reliably longer looking at the screen that matched this action. This shows that even before infants are able to string words together, they are able to understand the different roles of subject, verb, and object. Chomsky argues that language learning is supported by a language organ which contains knowledge of the universal grammar, which is the abstract specification that underlies all human languages. Languages differ syntactically in many ways. Some put the verb between the subject of the sentence and its object, like English, which is therefore known as a subject-verb-object or SVO language. Others put the verb first, then the subject, and then the object, such as Gaelic, while still others put the subject, then the object, followed by the verb, such as in German. The table shows the proportion of each of the logically possible 6 orderings of subject, verb, and object in a sample of 402 of the world's languages. As can be seen, the majority of languages are SOV or SVO, with OVS and OSV being extremely rare. Notice also that in 96% of this sample, the subject is placed before the object. Languages vary in other ways. English, for instance, is sticky about the order in which words appear in sentences. Change the word order and you change the meaning of the sentence. Other languages are more relaxed about word order. Instead, who's doing what to whom is conveyed by the use of special affixes added to the end, beginning, or in the middle of words. Although languages vary significantly in their syntax, there are certain abstract properties that all languages share. Languages differ in the orders of subject, object, and verb, but all languages use these syntactic components. All languages have structures which perform the function of nouns, adjectives, and prepositions. These similarities exist, according to Chomsky, because they are part of the newborn's innate knowledge of language contained in the universal grammar. How do children learn the particulars of the language spoken around them? Chomsky proposes that the child has a group of mental switches called parameters that are flicked as a result of linguistic experience, and it is this parameter setting that makes language learning so fast. As a simple example, a child's universal grammar tells the child that there are subjects and objects, but there is a free parameter which allows SVO, VSO, or SOV. If the child's linguistic environment were English, then as a result of exposure to language, the parameter would be set to SVO. On the other hand, if the child were growing up in a German-speaking environment, it would be set to SOV. Chomsky and his followers argue that even when children make grammatical errors, many of these are not simply random. It is proposed that many errors made by English children will be perfectly grammatical in some other language. Some errors made by young children in English have been shown to be perfectly grammatical in German. Universal grammar contains the abstract specification for all human languages that exist, have existed, and some that have never existed as well. The universal grammar enables the child, based on impoverished input, to induce the correct rules of the particular language that he or she is hearing and thereby become a member of the linguistic community. It appears that children are flexible and able to acquire new languages with great ease up until around the age of 7, after which this ability gradually declines. Many now accept that language involves a complex design of interacting parts, somehow represented in our genome. But if language is in the genes, where are these genes? What progress has been made in identifying how the language organ is specified in the genome? Recent research on a language disorder known as specific language impairment, SLI, has been widely touted as evidence for the genetic basis of a language organ. Specific language impairment, as the name implies, is a disorder that targets certain aspects of language production, particularly certain aspects of grammar, with no obvious profound sensory or neurological impairment. Speech is effortful and often unintelligible, with many word order and other grammatical errors evident. A family from Birmingham in the British Midlands was studied in the late 1980s by psycholinguist Myrna Gopnik and colleagues. 16 out of 30 members of the extended family were affected by a particularly severe form of SLI, leading them to produce sentences such as, "It's a flying finches they are," "Carol is cry in the church," "A Patrick is naughty." As these quotations emphasize, SLI sufferers seem to have particular problems with inflectional morphology. Inflectional morphology is the process whereby words are modified to indicate grammatical features, such as number, tense, agreement, and aspect. Gopnik tested SLI sufferers on a test known as the WOG Test. We know from extensive research that children of 3 and 4 years of age are able to inflect novel nouns for plurality. In the WOG test, the child is given a picture of an unfamiliar object that is given a novel name such as WOG, and then shown a further picture representing two such objects and told, now there are two of them. There are two blank. And the child is encouraged to inflect the name to produce the plural, WOGs. Gopnik's research demonstrated that even adult sufferers of SLI find the WOG test demanding. Not only do they frequently fail to use the correct suffix, when they do, it is frequently mispronounced to produce words such as WOGs.
This is a lun. Now there's another one. There are two of them.
To illustrate that what the child has learned is a grammar and not a huge memory bank of phrases, Jean Gleason invented a test called the WOG Test. This test shows how children can apply the rules of their language even to nonsense words that they could never have heard before.
Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are two
WOGs.
Right. Oh, look at this funny one. This is a man who knows how to bod. He's bodding. He did the same thing yesterday. What did he do yesterday? Yesterday he...
Bodded.
Bodded, right. This is a gutch. Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are two...
Gutches.
Right. This is a bick who owns a hat. Whose hat is it? It is the...
Bicks.
Now there are two bicks. They both own hats. Whose hats are they? They are the...
Bicks.
Right.
Certain forms of SLI appear to be genetic in that they run in families. The pattern of inheritance suggests that it is the result of a single dominant gene on an autosomal chromosome. More recent research suggests that the gene responsible for SLI lies on chromosome 7. Specifically, it appears that the damage is in region 7q31 in an area comprising 70 different genes that was called SPCH1. Further research suggests that the crucial gene seems to be one known as FOXP2. FOXP2 is not unique to humans, but the specific version present in humans is subtly different from the versions present in other animals. Comparative genetic research by Innate et al. Suggests that the gene reached its current state 100 to 200,000 years ago. More recent research has capitalized on the ability to use DNA samples from extinct species, specifically Homo neanderthalensis or Neanderthals. This research is particularly exciting as it enables us to better understand our closest relative and ourselves. The research suggests that Neanderthals possessed exactly the same variant of FOXP2 as modern humans, further reinforcing the notion that Neanderthals possessed language of some form. Other research suggests that rather than FOXP2 reaching its current state before the anatomically modern human and Neanderthal lineage split from one another, the genetic evidence can be better explained by assuming gene flow between humans and Neanderthals. In other words, the two groups interbred. If this is the case, then it suggests that Neanderthals got the FOXP2 gene from humans rather than the other way around, as Neanderthal DNA is not present in indigenous Africans, but FOXP2 and of course language is. All of this raises the question, is FOXP2 the grammar gene? It most likely is not. As we have seen before, the disruption of a single gene can have wide-ranging effects on behavior, but this does not mean that that gene is only for a particular behavior. More recent research has indeed shown that FOXP2 has a variety of phenotypic effects. This is partly because FOXP2 codes for a transcription factor, a protein that binds to other genes potentially affecting their expression, which is how the gene exerts its phenotypic effect. So a mutation in FOXP2 would have a variety of effects, particularly on the brain where it seems to have its most profound effects, causing difficulty moving the lower face, especially the mouth and lower lip. Moreover, they also had significantly reduced verbal and spatial IQ. Curiously, other research shows that if mice are engineered with a non-functioning version of FOXP2, they will show either a reduction in or an absence of ultrasonic vocalizations that are usually produced when pups are removed from their mothers, with the extent of this deficit depending on whether one or both copies of the gene are damaged. However, other effects are also noted, including motor problems and, in those where both copies are damaged, premature death. Research on FOXP2 is still ongoing, It certainly does seem to play a role in language and other forms of communication.